To truly grasp the labyrinthine world of offshore finance, we must journey back in time, tracing the threads of its origins. This isn't a modern phenomenon born from the digital age. Its roots are deeply embedded in centuries of global commerce, imperial ambition, and the perennial human desire to protect wealth from the prying eyes of states and rivals. The concept of moving assets beyond the reach of local jurisdiction is as old as taxation itself, but its modern, industrial-scale iteration began to take shape in the shadows of two world wars and the subsequent geopolitical shifts. The early 20th century, scarred by global conflicts and economic upheavals, proved to be fertile ground for the nascent offshore industry. As nations grappled with immense war debts and sought to rebuild, they implemented higher taxes and stricter capital controls. This created a powerful incentive for the wealthy to seek refuge for their assets. Switzerland, with its long-standing tradition of neutrality and bank secrecy laws, initially codified in 1934 to protect Jewish assets from Nazi Germany, but quickly evolving into a shield for all, emerged as a pioneering model. Its reputation for discretion, coupled with a stable political and economic environment, made it an irresistible magnet for capital fleeing instability and taxation. The 1934 banking law, specifically Article 47, criminalized the divulgence of client information, laying the bedrock for what would become the world's most renowned secrecy jurisdiction. But Switzerland was just the beginning. The post-war economic boom, coupled with the Cold War's geopolitical anxieties, spurred the proliferation of new, more aggressive tax havens. Small, often former colonial territories, lacking significant natural resources or industrial bases, found a novel path to economic prosperity, offering financial secrecy and minimal taxation. These jurisdictions, frequently islands or microstates, began to craft bespoke legal frameworks designed explicitly to attract foreign capital. They understood a fundamental principle. In a world of increasing regulation, the absence of it could be a powerful commodity. The British Empire, in its twilight, inadvertently laid much of the groundwork. Many of the most prominent modern tax havens, the British Virgin Islands, the Cayman Islands, Bermuda, were, and in some cases still are, British overseas territories or former colonies. They inherited a common law legal system, making it easier for Western lawyers and financial institutions to navigate. London, in turn, became the central nervous system for this burgeoning offshore network, connecting the capital flowing from these distant outposts to global financial markets. The City of London's unique position, with its centuries-old expertise in international finance and its vast network of legal and accounting firms, became the crucial bridge between the wealth generated globally and the secrecy offered by these peripheral jurisdictions. The mechanism at the heart of this system is deceptively simple, yet incredibly powerful. The shell company. Imagine a series of nested boxes. The outermost box is a company registered in a jurisdiction like the British Virgin Islands. Inside it, there might be another company, perhaps in Panama, and inside that, another, until the true owner is buried beneath layers of corporate anonymity. These entities, often with no physical presence, no employees, and no genuine economic activity in their registered location, exist solely on paper, designed to obscure ownership and facilitate the movement of money. The genius, and indeed the danger, of this structure lies in its legal fiction. A company, under law, is a separate legal person, can own assets, incur debts, and enter into contracts. When that person is registered in a jurisdiction that demands no public disclosure of its true owners, the beneficial owners, it creates an impenetrable veil. This veil can then be used to hold bank accounts, real estate, yachts, private jets, or even shares in legitimate businesses, all while shielding the identity of the individual ultimately controlling these assets. The anonymity provided by these structures is not merely a preference. It is a strategic tool, allowing billionaires to minimize tax obligations by shifting profits, avoiding capital gains, and bypassing inheritance taxes. In the year 2021, a tremor ran through the global financial elite. It wasn't a market crash, nor a political scandal in the traditional sense. It was a leak, a meticulously compiled, deeply unsettling investigation by the independent, non-profit newsroom ProPublica, revealing something that had long been whispered in hushed tones, suspected by economists, and felt instinctively by working people, but never before proven with such irrefutable precision and granular detail. the investigation laid bare a stark and uncomfortable truth. Some of the wealthiest individuals in the United States, titans of industry, innovators, visionaries with personal fortunes not merely in the millions, but soaring into the dizzying tens, even hundreds of billions of dollars, were paying income tax at effective rates that were not just low, but shockingly infinitesimally low. Rates often far beneath those shouldered by their own executive assistants, their household staff, or even the average middle-class worker. Consider the stark numbers that emerged from ProPublica's analysis of IRS tax data. Warren Buffett, the venerable oracle of Omaha, saw his wealth balloon by an astonishing $24.3 billion between 2014 and 2018. During that same period, his effective federal income tax rate was a minuscule 0.1%. For every $10,000 his fortune grew, he paid just $10 in federal income tax. Then there was Elon Musk, whose effective federal income tax rate during those years remained remarkably low at 3.27%, a fraction of what many ordinary Americans pay. And perhaps most jarring of all, Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon. In 2 of those years investigated, Bezos legally paid precisely $0 in federal income tax. 0. These revelations were not merely about the absence of income tax payments. They highlighted a fundamental difference in how wealth is generated and taxed. For most citizens, income is derived from wages, salaries, or small business profits, which are taxed annually at progressive rates. For the ultra-wealthy, a significant portion of their burgeoning fortunes isn't income in the traditional sense. It's unrealized capital gains, the increasing value of their stock holdings, real estate, or other assets that haven't been sold. Under current tax law, these gains are not taxed until they are realized through a sale. Adding to this complexity are sophisticated financial instruments and strategies. Billionaires often take out loans against their appreciated stock portfolios, using these borrowed funds for lavish expenses or new investments, rather than selling assets and incurring capital gains tax. The interest on these loans can even be tax-deductible. Furthermore, the strategic use of trusts, shell corporations, and philanthropic foundations allows for the intergenerational transfer of wealth with minimal tax liability, sometimes effectively shielding assets from taxation for generations. The Tax Justice Network estimated that wealthy individuals were hiding as much as $32 trillion in offshore assets. To truly put that figure into perspective, $32 trillion is larger than the combined annual gross domestic product of the United States and China, the 2 largest economies in the world. This shadow financial system isn't a recent phenomenon. Its roots can be traced back centuries, evolving from ancient trade routes and the need for merchants to protect their assets from capricious rulers. However, the modern iteration gained significant traction in the post-World War II era, fueled by increasing globalization, the rise of powerful financial institutions, and the digital revolution which made capital flows virtually instantaneous. The proliferation of tax havens, from the pristine beaches of the Caribbean to the bustling financial districts of European microstates, represents a deliberate fragmentation of financial sovereignty. These jurisdictions actively compete to offer the most permissive regulatory environments, the tightest secrecy laws, and the most attractive tax rates, often 0, to attract global capital. This financial architecture is not accidental. It is the product of decades of legal innovation, lobbying, and the deliberate weakening of international tax cooperation. These leaks didn't just expose individual cases. They exposed the system. They showed how the largest banks, the most prestigious law firms, and the most respected accounting firms were often complicit, acting as enablers in this shadow economy. They designed the structures, facilitated the transfers, and provided the legal cover, often for exorbitant fees. The sheer scale and systemic nature of these operations became undeniable. The implications extend far beyond individual fortunes. When the wealthy and powerful hide their assets offshore, it deprives national treasuries of much-needed tax revenue. This revenue could be used to fund public services, healthcare, education, infrastructure. Instead, the burden of taxation disproportionately falls on ordinary citizens and small businesses, exacerbating economic inequality and fueling public resentment. The very fabric of democratic societies is strained when citizens perceive a 2-tiered system of justice and taxation. Moreover, offshore secrecy provides fertile ground for corruption. Dictators, kleptocrats, and corrupt officials can siphon off state assets and hide them abroad, safely beyond the reach of their own citizens or international investigators. This perpetuates poverty, undermines good governance, and fuels instability in developing nations. The resources meant for national development instead line the pockets of a select few. The stories unearthed by ProPublica, the Panama Papers, and the Pandora Papers are not just isolated anecdotes of individual greed. They are symptoms of a global financial architecture designed with secrecy at its core, an architecture that allows the powerful to operate outside the norms that govern the rest of society. In 2021, a tremor ran through the global financial elite. The ProPublica investigation revealed that some of the wealthiest individuals in the United States were paying income tax at effective rates shockingly lower than their own employees. Warren Buffett's wealth grew by $24.3 billion between 2014 and 2018, yet his effective federal income tax rate was a minuscule 0.1%. Jeff Bezos, in 2 of those years, legally paid precisely $0 in federal income tax. These revelations highlighted a fundamental difference in how wealth is generated and taxed. For most citizens, income is derived from wages and salaries, taxed annually at progressive rates. For the ultra-wealthy, a significant portion of their fortunes isn't income in the traditional sense. It's unrealized capital gains, the increasing value of assets that haven't been sold. Under current tax law, these gains are not taxed until they are realized through a sale. This distinction sits at the heart of how billionaires legally avoid paying meaningful tax across their entire lifetimes. The EU Tax Observatory estimated that the planet's 2,756 billionaires collectively pay an effective income tax rate of approximately 0.5% of their total wealth each year. Compare this to the average British worker whose effective tax rate, including income tax and national insurance, hovers around 20 to 25%. The system is not merely skewed, it is fundamentally bifurcated, with one set of rules for those whose income derives from labor, and another, far more lenient, for those whose wealth accrues from capital. And here is what is absolutely crucial to understand. Virtually none of this is illegal. The sophisticated structures and financial instruments that enable this level of wealth to accumulate, largely beyond the reach of national tax authorities, are not mere loopholes in a broken system. They are fundamental features of a system that was, in many respects, designed to function precisely this way. They are the deliberate creations of legal and financial engineering, crafted over decades to serve the interests of capital over labor, of wealth accumulation over public good. These individuals, it is crucial to understand, are not tax evaders. They have not been charged with any crime. There are no allegations of illicit dealings, hidden offshore accounts in the traditional, illegal sense, or fraudulent misrepresentation of their income. On the contrary, they are following the rules. They are operating entirely within the legal framework of a system that was not merely designed, but meticulously crafted, largely by people like them, for people like them. This documentary is about that system. It is not about the shadowy, illegal underworld of finance, the illicit Swiss bank accounts stuffed with undeclared cash, the outright fraud, the criminal enterprises laundering dirty money through shell corporations. This is about the legal version, the meticulously constructed architecture of wealth preservation and tax minimization that operates in plain sight, yet remains largely invisible to the majority of the population. We will explore the master architects who designed these strategies, the intricate trusts that hold vast fortunes, the ingenious methods of leveraging loans against assets never sold, and the charitable foundations that, with one hand, perform genuine philanthropy while, with the other, deftly shield colossal wealth from taxation. We will delve into the obscure, often sun-drenched, jurisdictions that exist almost entirely to allow money to disappear from one demanding tax regime and reappear somewhere more convenient, more accommodating, less inquisitive. This is how the system actually works, not for the struggling small business owner, not for the salaried professional, but for the exclusive club of the world's 2,756 billionaires who, collectively, hold an estimated $13 trillion in assets. A sum so vast it defies easy comprehension. Before we can dissect the how, we must first confront the sheer, almost incomprehensible what. The scale of offshore wealth hiding is genuinely difficult to conceptualize. The Tax Justice Network estimated that wealthy individuals were hiding as much as $32 trillion in offshore assets. To truly put that figure into perspective, $32 trillion is a sum larger than the combined annual gross domestic product of the United States and China, the two largest economies in the world. This isn't just about lost tax revenue. It's about a parallel economy, an opaque financial universe operating with its own rules or lack thereof. The proliferation of tax havens, from the pristine beaches of the Caribbean to the bustling financial districts of European microstates, represents a deliberate fragmentation of financial sovereignty. These jurisdictions actively compete to offer the most permissive regulatory environments, the tightest secrecy laws, and the most attractive tax rates, often zero, to attract global capital. Research by economist James Henry, formerly chief economist at McKinsey & Company, revealed that fewer than 100,000 people globally own an estimated $9.8 trillion in offshore assets. Fewer people than would comfortably fit into a large football stadium, collectively holding wealth equivalent to the GDP of the United Kingdom, multiplied by 4. In 2023, Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs announced a single, astonishing case where they secured £652 million in unpaid tax from one billionaire who had failed to declare offshore trusts. One case, £652 million. A report published by the National Audit Office concluded that HMRC simply does not possess adequate tools, resources, or comprehensive data to fully understand the true scale of non-compliance and tax avoidance among the wealthiest individuals. The tax authorities are, in essence, trying to catch whales with nets designed for minnows. Recently, the EU Tax Observatory, a research initiative led by the acclaimed French economist Gabriel Zucman, a leading authority on wealth inequality and tax havens, published a seminal report in 2023. Their findings were equally stark, focusing specifically on the world's most affluent. The observatory estimated that the planet's 2,756 billionaires collectively pay an effective income tax rate of approximately 0.5% of their total wealth each year. Compare this to the average British worker. When you factor in income tax, national insurance contributions, and various other levies, the average effective tax rate for a typical worker in the UK hovers around 20 to 25%. This is not an anomaly. Similar disparities exist across most developed economies. The system, therefore, is not merely skewed. It is fundamentally bifurcated, with one set of rules for those whose income derives from labor, and another, far more lenient, for those whose wealth accrues from capital. The implications of this disparity are not theoretical. They manifest in tangible ways, impacting public services, infrastructure, and social cohesion. In 2023, Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs provided a rare glimpse into the scale of individual cases. They announced a single, astonishing case where they secured £652 million in unpaid tax from one billionaire who had failed to declare offshore trusts. One case, £652 million. This amount is larger than the entire annual budget of some government departments, could fund thousands of nurses, build dozens of schools, or significantly bolster social care programs. A report published by the National Audit Office concluded that HMRC simply does not possess adequate tools, resources, or comprehensive data to even fully understand the true scale of non-compliance and tax avoidance among the wealthiest individuals. The report highlighted a critical flaw. HMRC's definition of a high net worth individual often caps out at a certain wealth threshold. A billionaire could possess 100 times more wealth than this definition, yet face barely more scrutiny. The tax authorities are, in essence, trying to catch whales with nets designed for minnows, often with outdated equipment and a severe lack of specialized personnel trained to navigate the intricate financial structures employed by the ultra-rich. The concentration of this hidden wealth is equally staggering. Research by economist James Henry revealed that fewer than 100,000 people globally own an estimated $9.8 trillion in offshore assets. Fewer people than would comfortably fit into a large football stadium, collectively holding wealth equivalent to the GDP of the United Kingdom, multiplied by 4. And here is what is absolutely crucial to understand before we delve deeper into the mechanisms. Virtually none of this is illegal. The sophisticated, often labyrinthine structures and financial instruments that enable this level of wealth to accumulate, to compound, and to survive generation after generation, largely beyond the reach of national tax authorities, are not mere loopholes in a broken system. They are not accidental oversights that can be easily patched. On the contrary, they are fundamental features of a system that was, in many respects, designed to function precisely this way. They are the deliberate creations of legal and financial engineering, crafted over decades to serve the interests of capital over labor, of wealth accumulation over public good. These mechanisms are often enshrined in international treaties, bilateral agreements, and national tax codes, carefully lobbied for and defended by powerful interests, rendering them not just permissible, but often actively encouraged within the existing legal framework. The single most potent, most pervasive, and most elegantly simple wealth preservation strategy deployed by the ultra-rich has a name that, at first blush, sounds almost like a darkly humorous video game cheat code. It is called buy, borrow, die. And it is, in these three deceptively simple words, the legal blueprint for how the ultra-wealthy manage to avoid paying meaningful capital gains tax across their entire lifetimes and beyond. Most ordinary individuals accumulate wealth through a relatively straightforward process. They earn an income, a salary, wages, professional fees, and that income is immediately subject to taxation. After paying income tax, they save and invest what remains. When their investments grow in value and they decide to sell them, they then pay capital gains tax on the profits realized from that sale. This is the conventional cycle. It is how wealth, in its normal trajectory, eventually reaches the taxman. Billionaires, however, largely bypass this conventional cycle. The first step is buy. Instead of drawing substantial salaries or taking large, taxable bonuses, the ultra-wealthy primarily accumulate and grow their fortunes through the ownership of assets that appreciate significantly in value over time. These assets are diverse. Vast holdings of stock in their own companies, sprawling real estate portfolios, private businesses, valuable art collections. The critical distinction here is that these assets grow in value continuously, often exponentially. But you do not pay tax on an asset simply because it has gone up in value. Tax is only triggered when the asset is sold and the gain is realized. This phenomenon is known as unrealized gains, and it sits at the absolute heart of the buy, borrow, die strategy. Consider the case of Elon Musk, whose net worth has soared by tens, even hundreds of billions of dollars in years when his official taxable income was comparatively modest. The vast majority of his wealth is not in a bank account. It is tied up in shares of Tesla and SpaceX, shares he has not sold. As long as he holds them, their dramatic appreciation remains untaxed. The second step is borrow. Now, our billionaire, while extraordinarily wealthy on paper, faces a practical dilemma. How do they actually access cash to fund their lifestyle without selling their appreciated assets and triggering a massive capital gains tax bill? The answer is elegant in its simplicity. They borrow against their assets. Banks and other financial institutions are not only willing, but eager to lend substantial sums to billionaires. Their colossal stock portfolios serve as extraordinarily robust collateral. Critically, loans, unlike income or realized capital gains, are not taxable events under current tax law. So, the billionaire obtains a loan, perhaps $100 million, $500 million, or even billions, against their stock. They pay a relatively low interest rate on the loan, often less than the rate at which their underlying assets are appreciating. Their lavish lifestyle is funded, and their tax bill remains minimal. The third step is die. When the billionaire eventually passes away, their estate passes to their heirs. And here, the tax code delivers its most extraordinary gift to dynastic wealth: the step-up in basis. Under this provision, when assets are inherited, their cost basis for tax purposes is reset to their market value at the time of death. This means that all of those decades of accumulated untaxed capital gains, the difference between what the billionaire originally paid for the assets and what they were worth at death, are simply erased, wiped clean. The heirs inherit the assets at their current market value, and if they were to sell them immediately, they would owe zero capital gains tax on a lifetime of appreciation. The outstanding loans taken out against those assets are repaid using the inherited wealth, and the cycle begins anew for the next generation. For decades, perhaps even centuries, the existence of a parallel financial universe was an open secret. Known to the select few who navigated its labyrinthine pathways, The elite bankers, the shrewd lawyers, the specialized accountants, and the often overwhelmed tax authorities. To the vast majority of the global population, it remained a phantom limb of the global economy. Felt in its effects, perhaps, but never truly seen. A whisper in the corridors of power, a rumor in the financial press, but never a concrete reality. This was a system meticulously crafted to operate in the shadows, its very effectiveness predicated on its invisibility. The mechanics were sophisticated, designed to exploit every loophole, every regulatory gap between sovereign nations. Shell corporations, trusts, foundations, these were the building blocks. They were not inherently illegal, often touted as legitimate tools for estate planning or asset protection, allowing families to pass on wealth across generations without excessive taxation or probate complications. But in the hands of those seeking to evade taxes, launder ill-gotten gains, or simply hide wealth from public scrutiny, they became instruments of profound deception. The offshore world thrived on anonymity, an intricate dance of proxies and nominees, each layer further obscuring the beneficial owner. A company might be registered in the British Virgin Islands, owned by a trust in Jersey, whose beneficiaries were designated by a foundation in Liechtenstein, all managed by a nominee director in Panama. Each step added a further degree of separation from the ultimate owner, transforming a simple financial transaction into an archaeological dig for authorities. This carefully constructed veil of secrecy began to fray, then dramatically tear on April 3, 2016. An anonymous source, known only as John Doe, made contact with the German newspaper Süddeutsche Zeitung. What they offered was not just a story, but an unprecedented flood of data. 11.5 million documents, totaling 2.6 terabytes of information, originating from a Panamanian law firm named Mossack Fonseca. This was not a leak, it was a deluge. The scale was staggering. It dwarfed every previous data leak in history, including WikiLeaks and the Edward Snowden revelations. This wasn't abstract financial theory. This was the plumbing of the offshore world laid bare. Names, dates, company registration numbers, email exchanges, copies of passports, financial statements, a meticulously detailed blueprint of how the global elite used Mossack Fonseca to establish shell companies and trusts, conceal assets, and circumvent tax obligations. The Süddeutsche Zeitung shared the data with the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. A network of over 300 journalists from more than 100 media organizations in 76 countries began the painstaking process of sifting through the digital mountain. For over a year, they worked in secret, cross-referencing, verifying, and connecting the dots. The result, unleashed on the world as the Panama Papers, was a seismic shock. The Panama Papers didn't just expose an industry, they exposed its clients. 12 sitting or former heads of state were implicated, their secret offshore holdings laid bare for the world to see. The revelations implicated close associates of Russian President Vladimir Putin, the father of then-British Prime Minister David Cameron, and numerous other political figures, celebrities, and business magnates from nearly every corner of the globe. The immediate fallout was dramatic. In Iceland, Prime Minister Sigmundur Dav Gunnlaugsson was revealed to have owned an offshore company with his wife, holding millions of dollars in claims against Icelandic banks that collapsed during the 2008 financial crisis. Thousands took to the streets of Reykjavik, banging pots and pans, demanding his resignation. Within days, facing a no-confidence vote, Gunnlaugsson stepped down, becoming the first head of government to be directly toppled by the Panama Papers revelations. Halfway across the world, in Pakistan, the revelations implicated the children of then-Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, who had used offshore companies to acquire luxury properties in London. The ensuing legal battle captivated the nation. Years later, in 2017, Pakistan's Supreme Court disqualified Sharif from office, citing his failure to declare assets linked to the offshore companies. It was a landmark ruling, demonstrating the tangible impact of investigative journalism on the highest echelons of power. The documents meticulously detailed how assets worth billions of dollars were funneled through these opaque structures. A common tactic involved the creation of a shell company in a jurisdiction like the British Virgin Islands, often managed by nominee directors, individuals whose names appeared on official documents but who held no real power, acting merely as a front for the true beneficial owner. This BVI company would then own another company, perhaps in Cyprus, which in turn might own a trust in Jersey. Each layer added distance, legal protection, and, crucially, secrecy. This multi-layered approach, often referred to as a Russian doll structure, made it incredibly difficult for tax authorities or law enforcement to trace the ultimate beneficial owner. The Panama Papers also shone a harsh spotlight on the role of established financial centers, particularly London. The UK, with its network of crown dependencies and overseas territories, places like Jersey, Guernsey, the Isle of Man, and the British Virgin Islands, was confirmed as one of the world's most significant hubs for offshore wealth servicing. The revelations detailed how UK-based lawyers, accountants, and wealth managers actively facilitated the creation and management of these opaque structures. Even the late father of then Prime Minister David Cameron was identified in the documents as having used an offshore fund in Panama. 5 years later, the echoes of the Panama Papers were still reverberating when an even larger earthquake struck. In October 2021, the Pandora Papers arrived. This time, 11.9 million documents, a collection even more extensive than its predecessor, sourced from 14 different offshore service providers across the globe. It was a testament to the resilience and adaptability of the offshore industry, which, despite increased scrutiny, had continued to evolve, finding new ways to offer discretion and anonymity. The Pandora Papers showed how, in response to some of the reforms initiated after 2016, the industry had simply shifted tactics, moving to new havens or utilizing more complex legal structures. Where a direct BVI company might have been used before, now a trust in a jurisdiction like South Dakota or Nevada, which offers even stricter privacy laws, might hold the BVI company, adding yet another veil. This illustrated a constant cat-and-mouse game between regulators and the architects of offshore finance, with the latter often several steps ahead. The Pandora Papers identified assets linked to over 330 politicians and public officials from more than 90 countries. Among them were Jordan's King Abdullah II, who secretly owned a £70 million property empire in Malibu, Washington, D.C., and London, acquired through offshore companies. Czech Prime Minister Andrej Babiš, who used offshore entities to buy a sprawling estate in the south of France. And former British Prime Minister Tony Blair and his wife, who saved £312,000 in stamp duty by purchasing an office building in London via an offshore company that owned the property. The Pandora Papers particularly illuminated London's enduring role as a global capital for offshore wealth. The documents detailed, with unprecedented clarity, how the city's property market had become a premier destination for illicit or undeclared funds. The ease with which anonymous offshore companies could purchase multi-million-pound properties, often without robust checks on the source of funds, had turned London into a veritable laundromat for global wealth, facilitating both tax avoidance and money laundering on a grand scale. The UK's unique trust structures, with their often opaque beneficial ownership rules, provided a complementary layer of secrecy, offering a level of discretion unavailable in many other jurisdictions. These trusts, often lauded for their legitimate estate planning purposes, were also expertly manipulated to hold assets without revealing the true owners, effectively creating financial fortresses. So, what truly changed in the wake of these monumental leaks? The immediate aftermath saw a flurry of activity. Regulatory scrutiny of offshore jurisdictions undoubtedly increased. The concept of beneficial ownership, identifying the real people behind anonymous companies, gained significant traction in policy debates, pushing governments worldwide to consider public registries of ownership. Automatic exchange of financial information between tax authorities expanded considerably, making it harder for individuals to hide assets across borders without detection. This system, bolstered by international agreements like the Common Reporting Standard, meant that banks in one country would automatically share account information of foreign residents with their home tax authorities, effectively eroding the traditional banking secrecy that offshore havens once guaranteed. A number of high-profile prosecutions resulted from leads developed through the leaked data, sending a clear message that the days of absolute impunity were perhaps numbered. Yet, the fundamental architecture of the offshore system, though bruised, remains largely intact. The shell companies still exist, adaptable and resilient, simply relocating or re-registering in jurisdictions less scrutinized or with more permissive regulations. The trusts, particularly in jurisdictions with robust secrecy laws, continue to provide layers of opacity. Offshore jurisdictions, far from being dismantled, continue to compete fiercely for clients, innovating their offerings to meet the demands of those seeking discretion. And the global stock of offshore wealth, estimated at a staggering $32 trillion at the time of the Panama Papers, has, according to most estimates, continued its relentless ascent. The leaks pulled back the curtain, revealing the stage and some of the actors, but the play, it seems, is far from over. The question of wealth, its accumulation, and its taxation is not merely an economic debate. It is a profound moral and societal one. For decades, the global financial system has been optimized to facilitate the concentration of capital, often at the expense of public good. But what if there was a path to rebalance this equation? In 2023, the EU Tax Observatory presented a bold proposition at the G20 summit in Brazil: a 2% annual wealth tax levied on the world's billionaires. The projected yield was staggering, an estimated $250 billion per year. To put that figure into perspective, it is a sum sufficient to fund universal primary education across the entire developing world. It could dramatically accelerate the fight against preventable diseases, or finance critical infrastructure in nations struggling to escape the cycle of poverty. The proposal built upon a precedent. In 2021, 140 nations agreed to a global minimum corporation tax of 15%. This landmark agreement, spearheaded by the OECD, was hailed as a historic breakthrough, a first step towards curbing the race to the bottom in corporate taxation. If nations could coalesce around taxing corporate profits, surely, in principle, they could agree to something similar for individual wealth at its most extreme concentrations. But the obstacles are formidable. The very individuals who would be subject to such a tax are often the same individuals who fund the political campaigns of those who would have to legislate it. The lobbying power of concentrated wealth is immense, its influence pervasive and often invisible. The offshore system did not build itself. It was built, piece by piece, through decades of political influence, legal innovation, and the quiet capture of regulatory bodies. The battle for a fairer tax system is, at its core, a battle for democracy itself. It is a question of whether governments represent the interests of all their citizens, or merely the interests of those wealthy enough to shape the rules. The Panama Papers and the Pandora Papers gave the world a rare, unobstructed view of the machinery of inequality. What we choose to do with that knowledge is the defining question of our time. If this documentary has given you a clearer picture of how the system works, please share it. Subscribe to the channel for more investigations into the financial systems that shape our world. And leave a comment below, because the more people understand this, the harder it becomes to ignore.